In Dark Souls 2, you lose a little bit of your humanity and a little bit of your maximum health with each death. Eventually, you overcome the obstacle that stood between you and victory, but your gain does not come without sacrifice. You have forfeited your own humanity as you collect the souls of the damned. Like Dark Souls and Demon Souls before it, Dark Souls 2 is not just a fantasy role-playing adventure, but a phenomenal exploration of dread. Few games make you this afraid to peer around the corner, while simultaneously curious as to what incredible new vista you might gaze upon. And death is so very beautiful in this game, for it comes at the hands of hulking armored knights and otherworldly invaders. Welcome to Drangleic, a world that makes you ask many questions and then expects you to go seeking the answers. Dark Souls 2 offers you an early taste of hope, however, in the hub area known as Majula. While Majula is mostly devoid of life when you first come upon it, it slowly fills out with the vendors you meet upon your travels. Your most important contact there is the cloaked woman who levels you up in exchange for souls, the game's currency. As with its predecessors, there are no waypoints and there is no quest log. Instead, you simply head out into Drangleic seeking to light primal bonfires and thus restore some dignity to this decrepit land. The basics are very similar to those of Demon Souls and Dark Souls. You defeat enemies in brutal and precise combat, collect their souls, and spend those souls on levels, equipment, and more. If you die, you lose the souls you were carrying and have one chance to retrieve them. Should you die again, those souls are gone. Some of the differences between Dark Souls and Dark Souls 2 are noticeable early on. For instance, usually when you die or rest at a bonfire, the world is refreshed and the standard enemies you killed respawn. But in Dark Souls 2, there comes a point at which many enemies in the area just don't respawn anymore, allowing you freedom to progress with fewer obstacles in your way. At first, you might worry that this change and others might soften the game's edge, but the grinding opportunities are still there. Dark Souls 2's main hook, though, is the promise of new and exciting places to explore and new and exciting foes to face. And that hook is supported by a number of subtle changes to the formula. For example, once you activate a bonfire, you can warp to it from any other bonfire without having to pass through perilous places over and over again. And the excitement of finding an item that in turn unlocks a new area is a far greater thrill than grinding for souls. The early forests and ruins are so very Dark Souls, but the intricate architecture and carefully planned enemy locations make even familiar-looking environments fresh and unique. The more progress you make, however, the more unusual and awesome the settings become. Though the lighting is somewhat flat, the settings are often incredible. Dragons soar in the skies, castles loom in the background, and glowing sunsets give you the slightest smidgen of hope. And so Dark Souls 2 is hard, but is it harder than the original? Not quite, nor are the bosses as awesome to look at as Sith or the Gaping Dragon. But the bosses are still visually inventive, and the game offers plentiful challenge. Trudging your way through shin-deep water while avoiding homing missiles is no easy task. Just as before, help comes from other players as well as from the game itself. All Dark Souls 2 players are intertwined in a comforting web of communication. As before, you see the spirits of other players as they journey through their own worlds, and if you feel truly cooperative, you can avail yourself to other players who can summon you in for assistance. You can also hinder other players by invading their worlds, just as before, though certain additions to online play keep battles more dynamic than ever. For instance, if you use a particular item, monsters turn on your enemies. Luring an invader into a trap is an absolute delight. There's so much more to talk about with Dark Souls 2. There's the fantastic stretch near the end of the game that involves you in grander battles than you would expect from this series. Then there are the Covenants, fellowships that bond you with other players and give you more tools to assist or annihilate each other. How some of these Covenants may change the very feel of the game is still unclear at this early stage, but there's one thing you can count on. Dark Souls 2 is a big, fantastic, and satisfying game, and a worthy successor to one of the best RPGs ever made.